we can start this thing off with, you know, what is the medicine path for you, and how did you come to walk this path? Where did this all
hmm
come from?
well, the name, the medicine path, just kind of came to me in a flash a number of years ago, and I contemplate all the time about what it means. And I guess where I'm at with it now is that the medicine path is, our personal, unique journey toward wholeness and healing. Um, and that's different for everyone. And so what I try to do is help guide people to find their medicine path and, what's the medicine for them? What do they need uh, to live a soulful, fulfilling life? So that's what I know. Medicine path to some people just connotes working with plant medicines, that kind of thing. But for me, it's much broader. It could include plant medicines, but doesn't have to by any means. Um, yeah. So in a nutshell, that's what the medicine path is to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you said, healing and leading people toward a fulfilling life. So
Mhm.
what is that? What is a fulfilling life? Like what how do people find fulfillment through these countless modalities that you share?
Well, I think it has to be something that feeds their individual soul.
Mm,
And so we got to kind of work to find that, each of us, what touches us deeply, what provides us with a sense of meaning,
yeah.
what is the story that we're meant to be living, that helps us along our path toward some kind of purpose in terms of contributing something good and useful to the world,
Mm,
you know. And
yeah.
I think our individual task is to discover that in this lifetime.
Yeah. You think we all have that? Some innate purpose, something, a reason to be here, I guess you could say. Do you think we all have that?
Yeah, well, nature's not really into producing things that have no purpose. I mean, if you look around, I live in a very natural place, so I can look outside and everything that I gaze at has some kind of purpose in the overall ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like a bumblebee doesn't fly around wondering what his purpose is. He just does it, you
Yeah.
know? Like we're the only ones kind of saddled with this existential uncertainty about what it is we're doing here. And I think it has a lot to do with us being disconnected from a natural way of living.
Yeah.
People who live close to nature in communities, they never ask about what their purpose is. It's a given, according to their birth and their talents and gifts. The community recognizes that and shows them their purpose, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so we're in this strange situation where we come out and we're told that we can be anything, we can do anything, and without much guidance toward somebody recognizing what our unique gifts are and saying, you know what you're here for, it's to be whatever, a hunter, a healer, a musician, a herbalist, or a weaver, or a wood carver, or a canoe builder, all of these different occupations. For us, we're just told, it could be anything. It's like a blank slate.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, people are going to feel like unsure, anxious, about that. I mean, it's just kind of it's too much for us to handle all on our own, which I think is why we need mentorship. People who can see our gifts and say, you know what, I think you're really good at this, or kind of bless us by acknowledging our talents and gifts.
Mm-hmm. Is that your work?
That's what I try to do. Yeah, yeah. Try to be the kind of older person that I wish I would have had when I was just starting out, trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do in this life. Um, and so, yeah, I work with a lot of younger people, but also people in middle age who are struggling with what to do with the second half of their life, having found the first half the pursuit of material success unfulfilling, and having the inkling that there must be something more to life, which is, you asked earlier how I got started on my medicine path, and that was it. I mean, it was a very typical kind of midlife crisis. Finding myself climbing the corporate ladder, in a creative job, which was in its own way fulfilling, and I think in alignment with who I am, but it was in an environment that I found quite difficult. So these kind of corporate environments I found very constraining. There's a lot of pressure to fit in and conform.
Yep.
And, that was hurting my soul. So what brought me to my medicine path was suffering, which is what brings us all to our path of healing and growth and transformation. Suffering is the great initiator. And when the suffering gets bad enough, it forces you to start paying attention and to do something about it. And so all of my strategies for numbing myself to suffering stopped working, stopped being effective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And actually, in some cases, it just made the suffering worse, like, drinking too much and taking drugs and just distracting myself all of the time. Stopped working, and I had to start paying attention. And that's what got me on my medicine path.
Mm. Yeah, man. I feel like that's a common ailment of pretty much everybody. We're all suffering in one way or the other, and we just don't know how to go about quelling the suffering. And we're told numerous ways of how to go about it from the outside world. There's definitely plenty of stories that you can listen to and try to negate the suffering from, maybe drugs or just general hedonism, I guess, but that's really just an escape, and it doesn't really do anything to the suffering. If anything, like you said, it makes it worse. We just dig our hole deeper and deeper. So is your work to guide people to truly escape suffering? I don't even know if escape is the right word, or maybe see it a little differently, see our suffering as the catalyst to our inner dharma, our inner purpose, our soul, that divine nature within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm interested in helping people escape suffering. To me, the first step is to start getting close to it, actually, and start listening to it. If we think of the term psychopathology, which is a kind of diagnostic term for the kind of suffering that people experience, what it really means is basically the cry of the soul.
Wow.
Psyche-pathos, so the suffering of the soul. And so I think through these symptoms of depression, anxiety, addiction, that's the cry of the soul, asking for some attention. And this is the role of a psychotherapist. Psychotherapeia means attendant or servant to the soul.
Is this Greek?
Yeah. This is the Greek roots of these words that we use all the time, but have lost the original meanings, because much of modern psychotherapy and psychiatry is about, like you said, quelling the symptoms, turning the symptoms down so that people can just get on with ordinary life. And what that's really doing is muting the cry of the soul that's trying to get the ego's attention that things aren't right. Yeah. That the soul isn't being fed, that it's being starved or it's being wounded. And so I think the first thing that we have to do is just start to listen. What are the symptoms trying to direct our attention toward in our life? Like, where are things out of alignment in my life? And then to start to work with that, use the symptoms as the guide, actually.
Yeah.
That's how I see my work, as a servant to the soul, an attendant to the soul of each individual person that shows up. So it's about really just like listening, what's going on, and trying to look deeper past the kind of the surface interpretation of the symptoms, and these kind of throwaway uh, causal explanations for symptoms. Like, I experience social anxiety because of trauma, because something happened in my childhood, and that's it. If I can just find the exact moment where the trauma happened, somehow I'll be alleviated from this. The symptom will be alleviated. And I don't think that's how it works, actually. I think it's too reductive and simplistic. So the work is, it's deep, and it can take some time, to get past all of the conditioning and the various ego defenses that come up when we probe more deeply into what's going on under the surface. So it's like being in nature. You have to kind of you have to step softly. You have to move slowly, paying attention to every little thing that comes up in the way the person moves, the way they hold themselves, the way they speak, the kind of language they use, what's coming up in the dreams. So it's like being a naturalist of the psyche, of the soul. And you just go in and you take some field notes and you observe and you maybe make some hypotheses, and then you can offer something to do, to see if this is what the soul's asking for, like start playing more music maybe, or start dancing again, or maybe start singing, or reading poetry, or reading a different kind of book, something that's feeding the soul. And then you find out what kind of nutrients your soul's been lacking. And then generally, it's not that suffering goes away, but the suffering happens within a larger context of a meaningful life, rich with symbols and stories. And that makes the suffering that is inevitable in life easier to bear. It kind of, it softens it or lightens it in a way,
Yeah. From the simple observation of it in its nuances a little bit differently is what you're saying. Like just being able to simply re-examine the suffering and the phenomena of suffering and the symptoms of our suffering in the humanly vessel. That simply in itself is a way to, I don't know how else to say it, but I know this isn't the right way to say it, but negate suffering is just a simple re-examination of it. And then thus maybe that from there doesn't negate it itself, but it starts the journey to negation in one's being.
Well, never negation, because there's suffering in life that's inevitable. I mean, the Buddha came out and said that. He said, look, life is suffering. If you can accept that, now let's see what we can do about the suffering that's avoidable. And so that's what we try to actually do the work on, is the unnecessary suffering, accepting that a certain amount of suffering is inevitable in life and actually a meaningful part of life. Because it's the suffering that helps us to, in contrast, experience joy and wonder and beauty and all of the, quote unquote, good things. So the first step for me is just like you said, that a reorientation, a recontextualization of suffering, that suffering isn't something to be gotten rid of, but it's something to be listened to and kind of in service to, like thinking about suffering as a teacher or guide toward finding what my soul needs in order to feel fulfilled. So just that first reorientation can start to shift the way you see everything that's happened and is happening in your life.
I see.
All of a sudden there's like, oh, there's a reason that I went through that. What's the reason? Well, maybe it's to build some kind of inner strength or a certain type of character that's a part of my whole destiny, a part of my whole story. And some people show up in this lifetime ready to do that deeper work, and some people aren't ready. And I think, eventually the soul comes back around until the work is all taken care of. And then you're on to some other adventure.
Yeah, right.
Like you've graduated from the Earth School of Life. Now it's time to go, I don't know, back to Jupiter, wherever your soul originated.
It seems like that, right? It does seem like Earth is some kind of school. There is some kind of curriculum here, as Ram Dass would say. There is a, I mean, the non-dualists would say there's nothing going on, just be in the moment. I get that. I understand that, the absolute sense. But within the phenomenon, the movie of life, there seems to be
There's a
something
lot
going
going
on.
on,
Yeah, there seems
right?
to be something going on here. It's something that you got to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Just like you got to pay
Yeah.
attention in class. Like there's something that one has to learn at a deeper sense about yourself. You know, you have to learn. There's something going on here. That's all I got to say. There's something going on, and you got to pay
Yeah.
attention. But it's going on within yourself. That's the thing. It's not like going on out here and on Fox News. It's like there's something going on in here, and it's up to all of us to be able to figure out what that going on is, in all of our own accord, and go with that.
Yeah. There's something going on, and like Marvin Gaye, great teacher of the soul, would say, the good question to ask is, what's going on?
Exactly.
Something going on. What's going on in my particular circumstance, in my life, in the place where I came into being, like in the family of my origin, in the place and the time. So it's not only going on inside of us, but it is going on outside of us too. And those things are interrelated.
As above,
There's
so below.
a relational dynamic that's happening with my individual soul in this particular place and circumstance I find myself in. And that's part of the soul study of the psychology, is trying to understand, like, why me, why here, why now, all of those questions.
Exactly, man. Because none of us
Those are good
know.
questions to live by.
Yeah.
You might not find some definitive answer to any of those questions, but at least they're going to guide you toward a meaningful and purposeful life.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that, man. That's the first step. Just simply be curious. Have a sense of wonder at the divine mystery that we find ourselves in. And like you said, we're not going to find the answer. I don't think there even is an answer. The answer is that there is no answer. But I don't think that means give up the journey. You know?
Oh yeah, I mean, living the story is the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Living the story. I like that. Yeah. That
Like
seems to
your
be the point.
particular story, and Jung said, Carl Jung, he woke up and recognized that the important thing for him to discover is what was the personal myth that he was living. Like, what was his story?
The archetype, you're saying?
Well, the archetype of him.
Mm.
And so there's only one Carl Jung. There's going to be a lot of Jungians, like followers and people
Yeah.
who try to emulate him, but there's only one Carl Jung. It's like what they say about us, it's like, it's usually said in a kind of insulting way. It's like, oh, they really broke the mold with you, right?
Mm.
Maybe that's just from my generation, or my parent, the boomers, something they would say to us. But there's some truth in that. It's like, there's only one of me, there's only one of you, and we're living a very unique and amazing story, And so I think if we start to think of our lives as a story, it gives us that context that helps us put things in perspective, like the difficult things. If we were reading about a character who went through some challenges like we'd gone through, we'd see it as kind of a heroic journey, that they survived, that they persevered, that they kept moving toward the unseen goal,
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
why stories like Lord of the Rings continue to inspire people generations later, It's
Yeah.
because they touch that deep knowing inside of us that, I'm on some kind of journey and there's going to be a lot of challenges, but if I find the right mentors and the right companions, I can make it through.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, those stories are in us. Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all these whatever these classical archetypes that are within those stories are also within our story. I feel like there's one
Mhm.
story, if that makes sense. There's one story with all many stories within it. And that the thing is you are a part of that one story, and you also have those many stories within you in different ways, in different variations, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess it's just up to us to be able to find out what part of our being, we kind of, what am I trying to say here? What part of the
Yeah.
story we write in a way.
Yeah. No, I like that way of thinking of it, and just reminding ourselves that there is one uh, kind of uber story, that
Yeah.
our little story is just merely a chapter of. There are many chapters before. It's like one great epic.
Yeah.
It goes back thousands of years, and we play a very small part in that bigger story. I mean, I think that kind of perspective is really helpful too.
Mm.
It's not taking yourself so seriously, not being overburdened by the difficulties in your life. Remembering like all of the people just in my own family lineage that went through, God, just unfathomable difficulties and challenges and atrocities, so that I could be born here and now. I mean,
Yeah.
if I remember them, geez, that helps me get through any difficulties in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're part of the story as well. They're part of your story, all of our ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think learning that part of the story is really important aspect of any healing journey.
Yeah. You're saying
At
like
some
tapping
point,
into your ancestors?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
tapping into them, just trying to know some of their stories, and a lot of
Mm.
us have kind of like fractured lineages. And so those stories may be lost forever. So you have to kind of do some personal archaeology and find out whatever little fragments you can, and start maybe to piece something together. I know in my own case, when I started to do that, I had this feeling ever since I was a kid that I didn't quite belong in the family I was born into. I looked around, I'm like, who are these people? Like, I have nothing in common with them. I have all of these different interests, and like, how the hell did I end up here? And it wasn't until years later, when I started to do some of my own personal archaeology, I discovered some things about, my great grandfathers, for instance, on both sides, the maternal and paternal sides. Um, one, a man of very deep faith, who was very community oriented, who loved to play music, struggled with smoking cigarettes and things like that. I was given a short memoir that he wrote before his death. I never knew him. But through that, learning some things about this person I'd never met, I felt like an affinity to this ancestor.
Mm.
And I could see myself in him and his struggles. And on the other side, had a great grandfather who was a Mason. So he was obviously interested in more than what the local Protestant church offered. He was obviously interested in some kind of esotericism,
Like
like
Freemason.
the Freemasons are based
Wow.
on all this old like Egyptian mythology and
Oh yeah.
esotericism and stuff, right? It's all in that. And so to be a part of it, you know, someone's probably going to be kind of interested in that stuff. So, and I have now these certificates that he got as he went through the ranks. I have them up on one of our
Wow.
walls to remind me of him, and to remind myself that I have this actual ancestor who is also interested in the, the weird esoteric arts or alternatives to conventional religion,
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really helpful. I feel like, okay, I'm connected to somebody in this family. Maybe not my parents or my sibling, and the kind of direct family around me as I grew up, but a little further back, I could start to feel a kinship with some of these people I was learning something about. That was really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. Because they're literally a part of you. Those people,
Yeah,
they're an eighth, right, or they're a quarter. Like both of those people would be a quarter of you. Did I do the right math there? Great
I'm
grandfather,
terrible at math, but maybe
something
something
like
like that.
that.
Yeah.
They're a good portion of what your being actually is, and their habits and their mind is quite literally a portion of what your mind is. And what's trippy, I was thinking about this the other night, is like how many ancestors are in my lineage of what, like the person that you see now? Thousands, maybe even not, I don't know, million, that's a lot, but even just thousands of people that I am, that have existed in my DNA right now. All of their traits, physical, mental, spiritual, are in me, in anybody, like in you. All of our ancestors, really, we're just a culmination of all of our ancestors over the years in this moment. It's really trippy to think about that, but I can see, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
but I think it's important to sit and contemplate that,
Yeah.
right? Because it gives you a larger context for your life. It takes you out of the kind of individualist self-centeredness that creates a lot of anxiety
Yeah.
in people. And so if you see that, it's like, getting high and looking up at the stars and realizing, God, we're on this little blue orb. Our sun is one star in the cosmos. And my God, it's too big to even fathom. And don't I feel small and inconsequential? Same kind of thing, maybe even a bit closer to home, is like just thinking about that line of people behind you and just getting imagining some of their stories. They don't even have to be the kind of true factual stories, but just imagining what some of them must have gone through, knowing just a
Yeah.
little bit about history of the past 500, 1,000 or more years. Like, my God, like that puts the ego in the proper context. It's just like Carl Jung said, a little cork floating on a vast ocean,
Hmm. It is truly unfathomable. And some people say that, we have trauma in our DNA, or we have like certain karma built up from our ancestry. Maybe that's true. And maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
gives us a little bit more context into our identity and our samskaras, our certain vasanas, our certain kind of, it's just our things that we just think happen to us. Like, it's just like, maladies of the human condition. Well, maybe that's just because our ancestors have went through a lot of suffering and shit for us to literally be here. So in a way, we kind of have to reap what they've sowed in the past. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, in that too, I mean, that's another kind of problem I think with kind of modern pop psychology is the intense obsession with trauma.
Mm.
But you think about those sanskaras, like the impressions, the patterns that we inherit. Some of those are very beneficial. Somewhere down the line, one of our ancestors got eaten by a mountain lion in a cave. And so when we see a predator like a mountain lion, we have a fear response. Now, some people could see that as I'm having a traumatic flight response to something in my environment. Well, that's not something that you want to get rid of, is it? Because it's helping you to survive.
Yeah.
The traumas that are troublesome or problematic are often the ones that have us that spark that kind of response in a situation where it's not appropriate, like where you're not in actual danger, right?
Yeah,
And so those are the ones that we can work out, but those are usually from our own personal history.
Yeah, man. I think that's the thing too, is that the lions and the tigers and the spiders and the poisonous snakes now in our life, we have those impressions and literally in our DNA, encoded in our DNA. But in our life, those things are like our bills and traffic and the drama of, interpersonal relationships. And it's the same response. It's the same kind of stress response in the brain, of the nervous system, yet a different stressor. So I think that's like, it's like we're living in a different world with the same stressors and the same responses in our brain. So I think the work, getting back to it now, is being able to see that it's not actually a lion. We're not actually going to get eaten. Well, we might. I'm not going to say that there actually might be some people that have to fear lions, but the majority of us don't have to fear being eaten by a predator. But the predator for us is now a conceived predator, like we make
The
up
predator for a lot of us is capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wants to chew us up and spit us out.
Yeah.
As a part of that is all of those credit card bills and the mortgage payments and rent payments and all of that stuff that has really got people quite anxious right now. I see it all over the place. You know, inflation is a reality, rising housing prices, all of that stuff is causing people a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do, like, there's the old parable, mistaking the rope for a snake, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's from the Indian tradition, where there's snakes all over the place. But it's really, like you said, about clear seeing, like really seeing what's going on, and then responding accordingly, you know, appropriately. So that's a big part of it is, I think, is deconditioning yourself of these belief systems that we inherit from our family and from the culture. I like to think about it as decolonizing the mind.
I like that. Never heard that one before.
Stepping outside of culture and risking being an outsider in order to figure out who you really are, and making up your own mind, figuring out what you really think about things, and sorting through the beliefs that you've inherited, and discarding the ones that are limiting in a bad way, you know, limiting to your growth.
Would you describe that as almost like a 3-step process of the path, right? It's a re-examination, a reorientation, and then I don't know the word, you take a different kind of action from that. You know, it's a very like simple approach when we put it that way. It's just like being able to notice what's going on in your life, being able to re-examine your life, and then from there we act accordingly. That doesn't add any more suffering, I guess, more sattvic in a way. Would you say that's a good summary?
Yeah, the first step definitely has to be, because of how we're raised in this culture and what we've lost. You know, and I'm speaking from a person who grew up in North America. Okay, it's not like this everywhere, and I don't want to pretend like it is. But you know, here we are. I'm in Canada. You're in America. I've lived in both places, and they're very similar in a lot of ways. So, speaking from that context, I think, you know, for me, what has become really important is first that reorientation, and so, you know, as part of that is a recognition that we have a soul, that it needs feed and care. And if we don't attend to our soul, we're going to suffer unnecessarily. So first the reorientation, and then, learning how to see things more clearly. And so part of that is the deconditioning process. I mean, there's so much that can be evolved for any individual person. Like for a lot of people, it's really hard for them just to sit and be quiet. Right? So if that's where somebody's at, well, what can we do to support that? And for a lot of people, that might mean getting a handle on all of the stuff you use to distract yourself, like your social media use, or I don't know, drugs, drinking, internet, whatever the heck it is, right? So that there might be a lot of work that needs to be done there just to prepare you to be present and aware. So you got to do some of that clearing out process. So in like the shamanic paths and the yogic paths, the first step is always a cleansing process, limpieza, or the kind of the releasing that happens early on in the hatha yoga practice.
What is limpieza?
Limpieza is like a cleaning. Limpia means to clean.
Is that
and so
Spanish?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in some of the shamanic traditions that I've experienced, that first step, it's like the cleaning out process. You know, you got to like clean some stuff out first before there's any hope of seeing anything clearly. And it's the same in the yogic path too. So, you know, in the yogic path, at first building up some intensity in the practice, like building up some kind of alchemical heat to burn off some of this excess shit.
Tapas.
Tapas, to burn off the mullah, which is a word that means shit or garbage or waste. So we increase that internal heat to burn off the mullah that's, in one of the stories is there blocking Kundalini life energy from rising up through all the chakras and activating all of your potentials, right? Yeah. So, but the first job is like, turn up the heat, burn off the shit, get rid of the stuff that's just waste, that's getting in the way of you living out your true potential.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like the yoga system lays it all out so nicely, and provides us with a lot of these images that help us grasp the concepts, and kind of ignite our imagination and inspire our practice. That's why I love yoga, is because it's such a rich and complete system for this process, of reconnection, of re-yoking, my individual soul with the greater soul or divinity.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's what yoga is all about. People think it's just some kind of exercise routine, getting fit.
That's what America's made of it. It's turned it into a spiritualized calisthenics program, for fitness and well-being. But it's a really deep, alchemical, transformative system.
Yeah, it's a system. Yeah, it's almost like a guidebook that people figured out thousands of years ago.
Yeah,
thousands of years ago.
Dealing with a lot of the same problems that we're dealing with now, but like you're saying earlier, they just taking different forms.
Yeah, and it's ever more important. I feel like yoga and the lifestyle of yoga is ever more important today, to have that sort of foundation for one's being and one's life, a sort of practice to be able to reorient yourself. It's so important to have that. I mean, for me at least, I'm speaking personally, everybody has their own path, but I believe yoga, or yoga is an umbrella term. There's different forms of yoga, there's many different paths of yoga, but really just the idea and having yoga and holding that union, that the idea of union, and tying yourself to your soul, and the sense of really connecting with the divine and aligning yourself. That's so important in today's world, man. If not, then I feel like you turn into a cynic and a nihilist. Like yoga keeps me hopeful for the future, and it keeps me on like a straight and narrow of a path to this humanly vessel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really love about yoga that I didn't discover until I started to go deeper into it was that, this kind of like shorthand that people have about yoga. It's like yoga means to yoke, and it's about connecting yourself to the divine, it's still something out there, actually. Yeah. When yoga is really more about connecting yourself to everything in the world. I mean, this is what one of the meanings of Tantra. Tantra means like a kind of technique, but it also comes from the root word that has something to do with weaving. And so the way I like to think about Tantra is it's a technique that helps you connect yourself to the greater tapestry of life. Like we've been talking about, how our lives are these individual threads maybe, and when we start to connect with our ancestors, we see how our little thread is interwoven with all of their threads, and then we start to think about not just my ancestors but your ancestors, about the ancestors of that bird that's outside my window right now, of the tree that's outside my window, and all of a sudden you've got this vast, complex, rich tapestry of life. And to me, that's what Tantra is pointing to, is that you're a little thread and you're connected, but you don't see the connection the way you are. So there needs to be some clearing out, of those things that are filtering your perception. And then once you do realize that, oh my God, it's like, it not only puts your life in kind of a perspective that helps you manage personal stress and suffering and things like that, but it also like just it fills my soul up. Yeah,
man. And life becomes
like that
beautiful.
feeling of connection, like really tangibly being able to feel it, to see it, to live it. changes everything.
Seriously, man, it changes everything, right?
Yeah.
Everything, man. Uh-huh.
But that's why, one of the things I like about it is yoga's not a pill that you swallow. It's not a potion that you drink. It's something you have to show up for and do for it to actually work.
Yeah. So, what is the place for the pills that we do swallow and the potions that we drink? Is it to turn us on to the Tantra? Is it to show us maybe a little glimpse into the beauty and the tapestry and the holy mandala that our life is? Is it to give us a little bit of taste of it?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that's where how I've come to understand like the usefulness of psychedelics, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
is that they can give us a glimpse that sometimes reality in all its wonder and beauty and complexity is so obscured to us that we need something really strong to help us peek through,
Yeah, yeah,
to like make a little crack so the light can get in,
yeah.
or to
Thin the
like
veil.
clear a little bit of the mud off the window pane, however you want to think about it.
Yep.
And it's that glimpse that can offer us some inspiration. But then it becomes our personal responsibility to take up a practice to keep opening up that crack or to keep it from filling in again or to keep cleaning that window pane, so we don't lose it. If we rely on those substances, we're just caught in another whole self-defeating pattern,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like if the only way we can get that peek into reality is through the use of an external substance, then I don't know if we're any better off than we were in the first place. We're just kind of reliant on something else that's external to us and has its own implications to ecosystems and communities and things like that, that in
Mm-hmm.
a consumerist culture, we are also disconnected from. Like how many people who go to the weekend ayahuasca ceremony in your town, because there's one happening this weekend, I guarantee it. How many people there actually know where the ayahuasca they're about to drink comes from and who made it and the energy and effort it took to produce that shot glass full of magic potion that they're about to drink? Like,
Mm.
how many people do you think at those ceremonies really sit and contemplate that and think about the carbon footprint of it getting to where they are and what the
Yeah.
implications are of the monetary exchange that has to happen?
Mm-hmm. I don't think most people think about it like that. They just think about like the end goal, the chemical induction of their brain, and that's it. They
They
don't think
think
about the
about what's
story
in it
behind
for
it.
me.
Exactly. That's not a good intention. That's not a good set to go into it with, in my opinion.
Well, that's usually what people's intentions are based around.
Mm.
How can this help me?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So they've lost that bigger picture that we've been talking about, seeing themselves as a little thread in the great tapestry,
Yep. Mm.
and asking the question like, what am I here to contribute? Not what am I here to get out of life,
Mm-hmm.
but what am I here to contribute? And
Exactly.
what's stopping me from making that beneficial contribution to the world?
Yeah. Do you think that's where the reorientation leads to? And that's the basis of the reorientation. It's like rather than what can I get? It's what can I give?
I think that's a great way to start the reorientation process from the get go. Yeah. Like every quest starts with a question.
Mm. Yeah.
Like there's one for the postcard, right? And so I think our job is to first figure out what is the question? What is the
Yeah.
right question at this time? And things like the Parsifal myth, which is part of the Grail stories from European lineage. It's one of the guiding stories about a young man figuring out his life and what his duty is. And there's a question at the center of it that it takes him a while to figure out he even has to ask. But the question is, he's in search of this like holy grail, right? And the holy grail is, it's thought to be many different things, but it's really the source of life is one way we can think about it. And the question that he's meant to ask is, whom does the Grail serve?
Hmm.
It's not about what am I going to get when I discover the Grail. It's really, what is all of this in service to?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, sit there and ask that question in terms of your life. You know, all of that struggle that my ancestors went through to create me, with all of my limitations and my gifts, all of my idiosyncrasies, recognizing that I must be here for something, because nature doesn't create waste. Okay. Like the bumblebee and the birds and the trees and those bushes and the berries on the bushes, they all have a purpose in this. Okay. So I must have some reason for being here. With my individual gifts and limitations, what am I here to serve?
Mm-hmm.
What can I serve? What can I offer? I mean, that question, living that question out, will keep you busy the rest of your life, I think.
Yeah. Because I think we are servants. I think innately a human being is a servant. And we all serve in our own unique ways and our unique circumstances. That's what makes us special, and that's what makes life special and cool. Is that we all have our own way to contribute. And I think innately, yeah, we are all here to serve in one way or the other. We serve ourselves as well. Don't become too selfless, but it's an act of selfish selflessness. I think that's
Yeah.
how I believe.
Well, look, I mean, it's really kind of simple and practical, right? Like, if I'm not taking care of my personal needs, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'm not going to be much good to serve anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So the first service has to be to oneself, to kind of fill your own cup so that you have something actually to give to others or to the world,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But don't get lost in that, don't get kind of myopic on your healing journey,
Yeah.
Don't forget that initial question, whom does the Grail serve? Like, what is this healing that I'm seeking? What is this in service to? Like, it just kind of broaden the question. So it's not just about my healing, my journey, all of that stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, man.
At least it's a good way to orient your life.
Yeah. I
Right?
think so.
I think so too. I mean, yeah, the disclaimer, the asterisk on all of this stuff that I'm talking about is like, this is my personal opinion. This is my personal viewpoint. Take it or leave it. But we're here having a discussion. You're interested in finding out, what I'm all about right now. And things have changed in the past 10 years since I've been doing this work. Things will probably change in the next 10. My hope is that things just keep getting simpler and simpler, because that seems like the way it's going for me, really kind of distilled into some really simple guiding principles for life. I think, I know when I started out on my journey, you go out into the spiritual marketplace looking for some kind of help to alleviate the suffering you're feeling, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people promoting their ideas, their program, all of this stuff. That it's just like, it's made overly complex, and that keeps us in this kind of insecure, hungry state, which is really good for capitalism.
Exactly. Spiritual capitalism is a thing for sure.
But how many books do we really need on how to meditate? It's a one pager.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need any, to be honest.
Sit down, shut up. If that doesn't work, follow your breath, recite a mantra of some kind, count, chant, oh, doesn't even have to be om, just oh, whatever works. But that's basically it. That's a one pager.
Yeah.
But we've got countless books from countless authors, experts, trying to tell you that they know some kind of secret, or, that it's more difficult than it actually is, which keeps people in the right kind of mindset to be a consumer, and I want people to be free. So I try to break things down, try to simplify it, not overly complexify it. I don't want to string people along for the next bit of goodies, for the level 2 and the level 3. It's like, no, just give them the straight goods from the outset. Save us a lot of time and trouble.
Yeah. Exactly, man. There's a lot of charlatans out there just trying to make money off of people suffering, which that's a sense of like, I don't know, that's dirty. That's kind of evil, to be honest with you. It's a fine
Yeah,
line that
it's
one
probably
has to.
not good karma, right?
It's definitely not good karma. No, I don't think so. But hey, man, if people are willing to pay for it, then it's like, I don't know. That's their loss, I guess. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's really simple. Is that how you would direct? I guess one through the confusion, through the myriad of spiritual modalities and practices, is really just start with the breath. Just start with a simple meditation practice.
Hmm. Well, I think, one of the things that was taught in the yoga lineage that I've aligned myself to, that of TKV Desikachar and his father Krishnamacharya, the most important thing was to adapt the yoga to the individual. And everyone's different. So some people, yeah, maybe it's starting with a breath practice to help quiet the mind. A lot of people I find, especially modern people, myself included, like I needed to start with the body because I couldn't sit and be quiet. And most people I know, they can't sit and be quiet. Everybody I talk to in my practice, they're all trying to meditate. How
Yeah,
many people are actually successful? It's usually some kind of battle with the mind trying to get it to shut up for 5 minutes, and then
yeah,
when that doesn't work, you've got to rely on the latest app and have some celebrity walk you through a meditation. Well, that's not meditation either. Okay. So
mm,
most of us, I think, have to start with the body. I don't think we use our physical bodies enough in the right way in our modern culture. Like even just being able to sit on the ground is a real struggle for most modern people because we grow up sitting in chairs and our
hmm
bodies adapt to that. So for me, like what I've just, I came to understand this later, but what the yoga practice was helping me do initially was help return my body to a more natural state,
mm,
where I could move in ways that are quite natural to the human being, like being able to sit on the ground, being able to squat comfortably as a resting position, not as some kind of exercise, plyometric holding or something like that. No, to actually just squat and chill, like you see people do
squat and chill.
all over the rest of the non-Western world,
Yeah,
sitting at
right.
bus stops, chilling, no
That's how
need for a
most
bench.
people defecate in a squatting position, right? That's the
It's the
natural way to
best.
do it.
It's actually the best way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Gets all the tubes aligned in the right way for most efficient evacuation of the mullah, the shit that we're holding on to, right?
hmm
So, like for me, and I think a lot of modern people, that's the first step, actually, and that's in alignment with that old model of the human being from the Upanishads, the Panchamaya Kosha model, the five sheaths. So the grossest, most apparent sheath is the physical body. And I think that's just like a great place to start because it's like what we can see and feel, where we feel the most tangible results of our practice. So that then encourages us to go deeper into these other aspects. The next more subtle layer is the pranamaya kosha. And we access that with the breath work and looking at what we eat, how we're taking in life energy and how we're cultivating and preserving that life energy within our system. Um, so if I can't sit comfortably, I'm not going to be very successful at practicing pranayama because for pranayama, I have to be able to sit comfortably in a stable position for a certain amount of time so I can focus on something more subtle than my physical body.
Uh-huh.
It really makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So take care of the physical body, get that in a more natural state. Then I can start to work on the more subtle layer, the pranamaya kosha. So start working on my vital energy, cultivating and preserving that, helping it to flow in a more efficient manner. And then the next layer is the mind. Well, then the mind's in a better state to actually sit quietly, because my physical body's been taken care of. My energetic system is more stabilized. So the mind just naturally becomes more peaceful,
Stabilized.
clear,
Mm-hmm.
stabilized. Exactly. It's not jumping here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very practical the way this works. And then once the mind is stabilized, then we come to the Vijnana Maya Kosha, which means basically the wisdom layer. So that which is deeper beyond the mind, there's some wisdom there. Ooh, there's some inner wisdom that's accessible once my mind is clear and stabilized that can shine forth. It's not something to be cultivated, it's something to be uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that is the true self, the Atman, right? Which like is maybe where we can get to in those like blissful moments of like absolute peace and clarity, and we only have to have that experience maybe once or twice just to remind us that we're something more than the mind or the physical body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like for me, like the yoga system, and yoga's not for everyone, but man, I haven't found a more like logical, comprehensive, and practical system. Like it helps me diagnose what's wrong. It helps me put it in a context that makes sense. Like most of the suffering is caused by a mind that's conditioned, or a mind that's been, like we said, the samskaras, like these negative impressions have been made on my psyche due to my upbringing, due to my ancestry. It helps me to understand things, put it in a context, and then it gives me something to do about it. Kind of like step-by-step process.
Yeah.
Take care of
Exactly.
the physical body, take care of the energy body, take care of the mind, and then you have access to the wisdom and truth that we all suspect is somewhere inside of us.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's simple. That's the thing too. Is it's simple. Getting back to the simplification, is the yoga system is actually pretty simple and accessible. I think for all of us because we're all human.
Mhm.
We're all human, and yoga is meant for all humans. So it's just
Well, look,
yeah.
on one level, it can be very simple. Like I've just laid it out in a very simple way. There are these models that help us to understand it. But underlying that is that vast complexity that is life,
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the underlying philosophical systems, even of yoga, like Sankhya, it's incredibly complex. Like they try to kind of enumerate all the different aspects of life, in this like very dense and complex mathematical system. Like they tried to account for everything that we could observe in this world. So underlying it is like an acknowledgement of the vast complexity, the tantra of life. But there have been great teachers who have put it all together in a way that's understandable for normal schmoes like me and you,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, I have this like glimpse into the vast complexity of life. And like, what do I do about my suffering? Like, look, just start with the body.
Yeah.
Do some of these different poses and stretches and movements that I'm going to show you. Once your body's in a more natural state where you can be at more ease in your body, then I'll show you some simple breathing techniques, right? And we'll
Yeah.
quiet that monkey mind of yours. We go step by step like that,
Mm-hmm.
So it can be presented in a very simple way, very practical way.
Mm-hmm.
But underlying it, like the true master knows that, like, oh my God, the vast complexity underlying all this. But look, it's just going to confuse you or get caught up in these elaborate concepts. It's going to keep you more stuck in the mind, right? Because our
Mm-hmm.
minds can be so hungry for these complex models, like especially I think guys who are kind of more intellectually oriented
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get caught up in all this stuff, like all these vast systems and everything. Like, ooh, that's like food for the hungry mind.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the soul's like under here starving,
Yeah. Exactly. Gotta feed the soul. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not just feed the mind.
Hmm. So what is the? I don't really know much about Sankhya. You mentioned that they somehow explain the complexity of life through numerical systems.
Well, they try to account for everything through this. Yeah, well, account is the right word because they try to like count. Uh, I mean, I, I was kind of taught that a long time ago by one of my teachers, and I found it mind-boggling at the time. And so I left it, I didn't go deeper into it, but he gave me
Mm-hmm.
a glimpse that there was this underlying philosophical system that yoga was founded upon. So I'm no expert in Sankhya. I mean, you can Google it and have a look at it. It's just to make the point that underlying what can seem like a very simple approach to yoga is a vast system that's been really worked out by people over centuries.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, like, simpler is better, and simple actually works. Which is
Mm-hmm.
the great thing. It's like complexity sometimes keeps us from reaching our goal. Like we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about, it's like becomes food for the mind, and we get all caught up in these abstract concepts because they're so like neat,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
get it. But that's just like the mind hungry for more stuff to fill itself with.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't
And
really
that's
fill
part
it
of
up.
the, well, it may fill the mind, but like we were saying, like it
Not
doesn't
the
fill the
soul.
soul, which is the thing that is causing the suffering. To go back to where we started, what is
Mm-hmm.
suffering? The cry of undernourished or wounded soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Damn, man. This is good.
So, like, to keep the mind fed and the soul undernourished is kind of like the work of the devil.
Yeah, I think that's the world we live in, to be honest with you, man. We live in a very devilish world. It's all mind.
Yeah.
It's all mind. And the thing is, I don't think people even know they have a soul. That's the thing. Like we're not even exposed to the idea and the capacity to have that soulful nature. We're just so
Yeah.
engrossed in the mind stuff that it shields us from that other aspect of what it means to be a human being. Because the mind, we still have the mind. The mind is always there, the rationale. We always have that. But it's like there's also another layer of the human existence here, which is the soul, the deeper mystery of life that we're completely cut off from. And I'm speaking from personal experience because at one point in my life, I was completely cut off from that. I didn't know anything of the soul. I heard people talk about it, like in context of like a church or in like in a dogmatic form, but like actually truly connecting with one's soul is a totally different story. And I feel as though that is the vast majority of human beings. We are just cut off from that. We have no one. People don't even know that that's a thing. We might know it's a thing on the bit on the mind level, right? When people tell you about souls and stuff like that, but to really embody one's soul, to align oneself, and to feel one's soul, and come into that totally different story. And people don't even know what to think. Like this path of yoga, it's not even like on anybody's radar. Like it just seems unrealistic. It just seems like an exercise. Like I said, it doesn't seem like um it's like, one, people aren't exposed to it, and two, if they are exposed to it, they don't go down and follow the route, because I just don't think people think it's realistic. They don't think it's like a reality to truly like come into one's divinity. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Mm.
it is a realistic thing for everybody. Like, we all have the potential to do that, but I just don't think we we have the gumption to do so, because we live in a devilish world that cuts us off from that. It literally keeps us in a state of ignorance where we don't even think it's possible. It's just what is possible is just materialism. And hey, don't you want this nice car and this nice house, and the validation from the external world? Like, that's it. That's our sphere of most people's existence, when really the juice, you know the meat of existence is in the soul, but it's like it's just veiled in ignorance. Like, nobody has any idea that it's a thing. It's unfortunate, and we do live in a
Yeah.
devilish
Well,
world.
yeah. I just, I get a little, itchy when you use generalities like everyone and the world and these kind of things. Like, let's remember where we are, and that this is really, it's a symptom of modern Western person. This disconnection from soul. The loss of soul is the way I think about it. Loss of soul in our individual lives, a loss of soul in our cities and towns, in our culture. in our stories fundamentally. So like you're saying, the only place I'd hear about soul is in church. They might mention the soul. They don't talk about how to care for your soul. I mean, you're talking about church, so you're talking about Christianity. I mean, Christianity came out of the Greek world, where there was a tradition of caring for the soul, therapeia of the psyche, of the soul. I mean, that was the whole thing. And all of the gods were different representations, manifestations of the soul of the world, which is complex. So hence we have polytheism, because the world is complex and we need different deities to represent all these different aspects of life so that we can actually be in relationship with them. Monotheism is like this abstract idea of the one God. Who can relate to that? So then we create some image. And of course, the image is like an old bearded guy in the sky, the big daddy in the sky. And I mean, who wants to be in relationship with just that? This big angry daddy in the sky. So I think a return to the soul has to involve an opening to something like polytheism or animism, in order for us to be connected to all those different threads of life. They have to be personified because we relate to persons. So if I'm able to, and it's through story. Like if I grow up with a story that all trees are persons and they have parents and they have a purpose and they have children, which is like really true. They do. If I grow up with those stories, though, I'm going to relate to that tree outside my window much differently than somebody who doesn't grow up with that kind of story. They're going to have no problem cutting it down, because it's blocking the sunlight or, their view. And so having the soul in the stories changes everything. But to me, it's always about relationship. That's kind of the function of soul, is relatedness. Like soul is often conceived as the thing that binds us together. It's the thing, it's like the intermediary between transcendent spirit and the material body. The kind of in-between substance is soul. And so yoga is one way, it's only one path and there are many. I mean, just to help people understand that recovering soul in their modern Western, North American or European life can be actually quite simple and have nothing to do with yoga formally. Think about the way that we talk about soul. Like it's still there in our language. We talk about soul food. Well, what is soul food? Well, it's food that reminds me of my ancestors, that reminds me of maybe my mother and, what her mother taught her how to make. It's food that's comforting, that's nourishing, that makes me feel like happy and satisfied when I eat it.
Fulfilled.
Yes.
Filled.
Filled in all ways, not just, something heavy sitting in your gut, but it kind of fills up your heart too, right? Because you have all of these kind of nice associations with the food. Like I remember like the macaroni and cheese that my mom used to make, with the breadcrumbs on top and baked so it's like kind of crusty. When I have that meal to this day, I know it's not the best food actually for me and my body type. It's all like carbs and dairy, and gluten and all that stuff, right? But it feeds my soul because I have all these associations to it. Being a little kid, being taken care of, being nourished, right? So just even tuning into that, like what's my soul food? Goes beyond kind of nutritional value, right? Or so another way to think about it too is like soul music. Like you hear that, but what does it really mean? Well, again, it's connected to lineage. It's something that you associate with your people, You know, it's something that usually invokes some kind of deep feeling like love or sadness. Um, it usually gets the body moving, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so soul also has something to do with the body. You know, we talked about the food and the music, has something to do with where we come from, connecting to our roots, has something to do with deep feeling.
Yeah.
And you start to look around your life and go, okay, how am I feeding my soul with the things I surround myself by, with the kind of food that I eat, with the music I listen to, with the things I read? You know, like reading something like Lord of the Rings or reading fairy tales that you remember from your youth, um, reading, you know, old folklore from your culture.
Yeah.
That's food for the soul too. And you'll feel the difference, you know?
Yeah, man. So to me, connecting to the soul from that description is like connecting to a deeper meaning that goes beyond the mind. It's something that is almost indescribable, but it's something that it's deep in there, and it's a meaning and a story. Getting back to that, it's like a deeper story that is within us. That's what it seems like to me when you connect with the soul, and then you can also create with the soul. I think that is part of it as well. It's like once you connect to the soul, it's like that's the first step, and then the second step is creating soulful connections outwardly, like creating and curating the soul and embodying that soulful nature, right?
Yeah. No, I think you've got it there. Like soul is notoriously difficult to define,
Mm,
to pinpoint, to summarize. Soul kind of hates that. You know,
yeah.
soul wants to be more mysterious. There's an
Exactly.
association with the soul with depth and darkness, right? It
Mm,
can never quite be fully grasped. And so we get these little inklings, and it usually comes through feeling. Like, you know, you could say, like for me, soul, like people ask, like, what is soul? It's like, well, you know it when you feel it.
yeah,
Like once you
exactly.
start to attune to it, you know, like what I'm saying about the food and the music and things like that.
Mm,
Once you start to attune yourself, like reattune yourself to qualities of soul or expressions of soul, you just kind of know it when you feel it, right?
yeah, it's in the
And
moment,
it's in the
you know?
moment, but it can be in the moment of maybe remembering something that happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
So the soul also takes us out of time and place, really. Like like you said about the story, only the way I'd put it is that we find out that we're actually embedded in a deeper, bigger story.
Mm,
You know, it's not just in us. Of course, it is in us, but we're really in it.
ooh, yeah.
And that's the big move, is to recognize that the world has a soul. The Anima Mundi is what it
Mm,
used to be called. Um, and that we're embedded in that. Like you said from the outset, like we're part of this like way bigger meta story, you know. But we each have our personal lot in life to take care of, right? So I'm not just floating out there in the meta story or in the world soul, but no, I actually have some things to do in my individual life. And so, yes, I think connecting to soul is the first step. And then, of course, like getting back to what we were talking about with service and purpose and all of those things, the next move really to live a fulfilling life is to start creating with soul, start contributing to the soul of the world. Because, God, the most painful thing is when I'm starting to get connected to soul, you know, when I start to recover soul in my own personal life, all of a sudden I look out at the world that I live in and I just see soullessness everywhere. Soullessness in the architecture, soullessness in the shopping malls,
and the culture.
soullessness on the television.
Yep.
And oh my God, then I start to feel like a lonely soul in the world, in a soulless world, you know? And I could, just despair over that, or go traveling around the world trying to find a place with some more soul where I probably don't actually belong. It's not part of my story. I've all of a sudden I'm a character who found myself in the wrong location, like some alien visitor from another planet going like, where the hell am I? So actually rooting, like staying where your roots are, where you've been planted, I think is where the real work has to happen. So my response to like, oh my God, what a fucked up, superficial, soulless world I live in here in North America. Ugh. I could just like complain about it all the time. Or I could do what you suggested, is start to create something with soul. Try to add a little more soul into this, this particular part of the world that I find myself in. I think that's the right move.
I think it's the only move.
Well, it's not the only move. We could all go to Bali or Tulum or something, trying to find some place with more soul. But that's not good for Bali or Tulum. And someone who's deeply connected to soul is going to be able to see that, see that they're actually having a negative impact on the soul of that place and the people who are actually born there.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah, that's a different take, because that's a reality for a lot of people for sure. Like I gotta get out somewhere and just go on a pilgrimage to Costa Rica, or like you said, Bali or something. Try to live out there, find the others there. But
well, you use the right word actually. A pilgrimage is something you go out on and you return.
yeah,
right.
Very true.
So
Very true.
Go be a pilgrim. Go get filled up in some of these places. I've done it. I've gotten a lot from my experiences in other places. But the message I received pretty early on was, this ain't your place, though. I know you want to stay here and live in the place where there's magic and mystery and plant medicine all over. I know you want to stay here, but this ain't your job. You got to take some of this medicine back to where you're from, because they really need it there. And they don't have access to it like we do here. And if you come here and suck up all our medicine, it's not good for the people who live here.
Wow. Interesting, man. Yeah, you got to bring it home. Wow.
I think though that was a message given to me, and something I've had to wrestle with, because, I often don't want to be here. I don't want to be in North America. It's just like all those things that we've been talking about. It is all of those things, but it's going to stay that way, and nothing's going to change unless those of us who, are on this kind of path bring it on home. Try to cultivate something in our local communities that's soulful and good for the soul. Create some beauty and community and art and music and simple things. We don't have to be gurus or anything like that.
I agree, man. Yeah. So what do you do exactly? How do you bring it home? What is your work, if you want to get into that a little bit?
Well, let's end with that maybe.
Yeah.
Let's bring it on home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it home.
So, I think we've been talking about it this whole time. What is my approach? What is my orientation? I think, at this point, I'm 48 years old. I've lived a life, at least half of it, maybe.
I didn't know you're 48, man. You look a lot younger than that. So the medicine's working.
Well, I think it's having a youthful spirit.
Yeah.
Like the hair is going gray. There's no question about that. But there's a youthful spirit inside that I keep well fed.
Yeah.
So what I do, the way I think of myself now at this point, is as a friend and helpful guide on other people who are seeking their medicine path, who are seeking to recover their soul. And so that's me helping people out with what I've kind of gathered along on my path, practical tools, maybe a little wisdom. I don't know, at least some wisdom that I picked up from elders who are wiser than me that I can just pass on. You'll find me quoting a lot of people who came before me that I've learned from.
Yeah.
But sometimes things come through me too that might be something like wisdom. And so it's my job, as someone who was helped out early on when I was seeking help, to be of help to others. And so part of that is seeing people individually. A bigger part of that is holding community circles where people can go on soul journeys, go deep into the imaginal, and hopefully bring back some soul food of their own. And another part of that is trying to be a good neighbor to the people around me, human and non-human alike. And that's something that I can practice every single day. Has nothing to do with, making a livelihood in the financial sense, but it's making a life, being connected to the land here, paying attention to all these beings around me, sacrificing something for them, like buying birdseed and putting it out for the birds is a kind of a payment back to the beings of the land who I happen to be sharing it with at this moment,
Yeah.
These little simple things. Playing music with my wife and with my friends. I had a great jam session yesterday with some guys, just middle-aged guys who've been playing music a long time, just getting together for fun on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, that to me is like going to church. So it's simple and accessible things that will help you live a more soulful life, and like you're pointing to, then hopefully creating a more soulful world.
Yeah. Amen to that, man. Yeah, it's the little things, the little steps that we do, that we take.
Yeah, they can mean a lot.
Yeah,
like, for instance, the thing about the feeding the birds, my wife and I moved to this particular place coming up on 3 years ago. And when I moved here, we're out in the country. And so we have like a little neighborhood that we live in, but it's kind of isolated from towns or anything like that, So I felt kind of like alone and isolated here at first. I was walking the land and riding my bike around and getting to know the environment and the animals that live around here and things like that. But I didn't feel like I had given anything to the land yet, like I didn't quite belong. And I was just wrestling with this, this kind of question, like, what can I do to like belong here? I felt like there was some kind of payment I needed to make.
Yeah.
Something. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then I had this dream, and the dream was pretty clear in telling me that I needed to offer something to the spirits of the land, was the way it was put to me. But the way I understood it immediately was that the spirits of the land are actually the birds and the squirrels and the rabbits and things that live on this land. And it made it so tangible and practical for me. Because if it was just like the spirits of the land, I'm like, well, do I have to do some kind of ritual? Do I got to go out with sage and, make some kind of like incantation to the spirits of the land? No, it was feed the spirits of the land. And spirits, for me, it was really clear. They're the animals on the land. So what I started to do was buy these big bags of birdseed and put it out on this little stone slab outside the window here where I practice yoga and I see clients and things. And we have this whole community of birds and squirrels that show up now at this little, I think of it as like a sacrificial altar. Birdseed's not cheap. I'm not a rich person, but I think it's important. So I dutifully put out birdseed, and then I can watch this little community gather in our outside my window here, and that gave me, it seems like such a simple, small thing. Well, put out birdseed for the birds, dummy. But what I received from it is something of that sense of belonging, of a connection to this place.
Yeah.
And now if I'm late in putting out the seed, the birds actually come down and they start chirping at me. Like telling me like, hey, come on, we're hungry. You haven't done your duty yet. You haven't like earned your spot here today. And so because I'm paying attention and I respect them, they're the ones who are keeping me accountable. So it's the little things that are often the big things.
Yeah, man. Well said. Yeah, it doesn't take a lot for us to find that connection. Like you said, it's that connection I think that we all yearn for, connection to our soul, the divine, to God, to source, to the gods, whatever you want to call it, man, but it's that connection. And yeah, it's a good way to sum this whole thing up is it really doesn't take much. It's pretty simple. Yeah, man, just gotta bring it on home. But
yeah. Well, I like
yeah.
what Ram Dass used to say, but we're all just walking each other home. And home to me means that sense of belonging in this world, of like feeling like I have a place here, that I have something to contribute, and if I've got that, I can endure a lot of hardship.
True that, man.
So you're doing the work out there, asking some good questions, sharing conversations with the world, and making your own contribution in that way. So yeah, together, maybe we've helped take a few steps in the direction toward home.
I think so. I think we're on the way there. Maybe we're already there. Maybe it's the same thing. The journey is the destination. I don't know.
Home is where the heart is.
There it is. Exactly.
You got to feel your heart first to know your home, though. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Gary. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, man. Yeah, I appreciate your time, wisdom, presence. Yeah, wish you all the best. Keep doing your thing, man.
Yeah, wishing you all the best too.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link everything down below for everybody that listened this long.
Oh yeah, right. Self-promote. Look down there, follow the links, learn a little bit more if you want to. I got lots of resources that I've made for people over the years, the podcast, the yoga videos, breathwork videos, meditations, all that stuff. I've tried to create a lot of things with some soul to help others out. So Gary will link that up for us.
Cool. The medicine path back home.
Yeah, man. Take care.
All right, man. Peace, Brian.